I asked Mike Collins about life somewhere else in the universe, and he said, absolutely. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
You do?
I agree that I don't know that we can make it absolutely. Intelligent life, we're a unique species here on Earth. There's a lot of life here, but we're the intelligent ones.
Imagine stepping onto the moon, the whole world watching, history in the making. Yet Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the lunar surface, carried back more than just glory. He carried a chilling secret. For decades, whispers grew louder. What strange glowing object did he see outside Apollo 11? Today, we uncover the truth behind the vision NASA never wanted you to hear. To understand that secret, we must return to the historic journey of Apollo 11, where Aldrin not only made history, but also carried an unforgettable memory. Summer of 1969. The world held its breath as a silver rocket thundered into the sky. Apollo 11 was more than just a mission. It was the United States' answer to a decade of Cold War rivalry, a race not only for science, but for the soul of humanity. On board were three men, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Edwin Buzz Aldrin, each carrying the weight of history on their shoulders. For Buzz Aldrin, a decorated fighter pilot with a doctorate from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the journey to the moon was both destiny and duty. While Armstrong would become the first to step onto the lunar soil, Aldrin's role was no less monumental. He was the mission's lunar module pilot, the one who navigated the fragile craft Eagle down to the surface, threading it through peril and uncertainty. Without his precision, the landing might never have succeeded. When Aldrin followed Armstrong down the ladder, planting his boots onto the dusty surface, he instantly became the second human in history to walk on another world. Cameras captured the triumph, and the world cheered. But behind his golden visor, Aldrin was not only marveling at the stark beauty of the lunar landscape, he was also carrying a secret, an image burned into his memory, something he and his crewmates had glimpsed on the way to the moon. Something that could not be explained by science alone. Strange moment in space. It happened during the long, silent voyage between Earth and the moon. The three astronauts were floating inside Apollo 11, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the endless black of space, when something outside the window caught their eyes. It was not a star. Stars do not move like that. It was not sunlight. Its glow was too sharp, too deliberate. Buzz Aldrin later described it as a mysterious object, gleaming in the distance, keeping pace with their spacecraft as if watching. At first, they wondered if it could be part of their own ship, a panel that had broken loose during launch, or debris from the Saturn V rocket. But the way it shimmered and shifted suggested otherwise. Aldrin, Armstrong, and Collins exchanged uneasy glances. In the claustrophobic cabin, even whispers carried weight. They knew that every word they spoke was being monitored back on Earth. To describe it too openly could spark chaos. Imagine headlines declaring UFOs had greeted the moon mission. So they chose silence. Their official reports were cautious, vague. But for Aldrin, that image, the strange glowing shape outside Apollo 11, burned itself into memory. He would carry it for years, until the day he finally spoke of what he saw, breaking the code of silence that NASA had wrapped tightly around the event. That image never faded. It followed Aldrin for decades. And when silence became too heavy to bear, he finally chose to break it. For decades, Aldrin kept the memory buried beneath the weight of protocol and duty. NASA's official line was clear: speak only of science, of triumph, of American glory. But as the years passed, Aldrin's silence began to crack. In the early 2000s, during interviews for documentaries and public appearances, he carefully let fragments slip. He spoke of a glowing object trailing Apollo 11, of something that did not fit neatly into any engineering manual. The reaction was explosive. To hear it from a man who had actually walked on the moon was different from hearing rumors whispered by conspiracy theorists. Here was Buzz Aldrin, a war veteran and astronaut, admitting that he had seen something unexplainable. News outlets seized on his words, plastering headlines with "Aldrin saw a UFO." Suddenly, the second man on the moon was at the center of a storm that NASA had tried to avoid for decades. Of course, Aldrin was careful. He never outright said it was aliens. Instead, he admitted to seeing something strange, something they could not identify at the time. But the damage, or the revelation, was done. Once the words left his lips, they ignited a debate that still lingers. Was this just space debris? Or was Aldrin hinting at a deeper truth, one that he had carried with him since 1969? Aldrin's admission ignited a firestorm, forcing NASA to respond with its official explanation. When Aldrin's words began echoing across television screens, NASA moved quickly to steady the ship. Their explanation was calm, almost dismissive. The astronauts had likely seen part of the Saturn V rocket that had broken away during launch, or perhaps one of the 4 panels that had been jettisoned after deploying the lunar module. In other words, just space junk, nothing extraordinary. Engineers pointed out that fragments from the booster could easily have reflected sunlight and appeared to glow in the void of space. From their perspective, Aldrin had not witnessed anything alien, only the leftovers of humanity's own technology drifting in orbit. The case was closed, at least on paper, but not everyone was convinced. Critics asked, if it was just a piece of debris, why did the crew hesitate to report it in real time? Why cloak their words in ambiguity during the mission? And why would Aldrin, decades later, still describe the site with such careful, almost haunted phrasing? NASA's neat technical answer smoothed over the headlines, but it did little to erase the growing suspicion that something more had unfolded outside Apollo 11's windows, something too disruptive for the world of 1969 to handle. Psychological effects on Buzz Aldrin. The moon made him a legend, but it also left scars no one could see. In the years after Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin's life spiraled into turbulence. Behind the parades, medals, and speeches lay a man wrestling with shadows. He slipped into depression, battled alcoholism, and endured a painful divorce. To the outside world, it seemed like the unbearable weight of being the second man on the moon had crushed him. But to those who listened carefully, there was something more, an unspoken burden. The memory of that unexplained light lingered like a ghost. Aldrin himself admitted that he could not dismiss it easily. Even when NASA brushed it off as space debris, the image remained etched in his mind. It was as if the cosmos had whispered a secret only he could hear, and then demanded he keep it locked away. For a man trained to deal in facts and procedures, the silence became a prison. These struggles humanized Aldrin. He was no longer just the fearless astronaut stepping into history, but a man haunted by what he had seen, by what he could not say. His battles on Earth seemed, in some ways, as daunting as his steps on the lunar surface, proof that not all dangers of space travel are left behind in the void. Decades have passed since that first lunar landing, yet Buzz Aldrin's name still sparks awe and curiosity. No longer just the lunar module pilot, Aldrin has reinvented himself as a tireless advocate for space exploration. He speaks passionately about colonizing Mars, about humanity's duty to push beyond the moon. But every time he appears on stage, every interview he grants, one question lingers in the background. What exactly did he see out there? In recent years, Aldrin has grown more candid, though still measured. He acknowledges the strange object, but frames it in the language of possibility rather than certainty. To some, that restraint proves his credibility. He is not a conspiracy theorist chasing headlines, but a scientist admitting that not everything has an easy explanation. To others, it is tantalizing, an astronaut who hints at secrets, yet never fully unveils them. For Aldrin, the mystery has become part of his legacy. Alongside his historic moonwalk, the whispers of the UFO sighting now follow him, weaving into his legend. Whether it was debris or something more, his willingness to speak of it ensures that the question endures. And perhaps that is the most powerful legacy of all. Not an answer, but a reminder that even in humanity's greatest triumphs, there remain mysteries waiting to be solved. Expert commentary and UFO theories. The debate over Aldrin's sighting has split observers into two camps. On one side stand NASA engineers and aerospace experts. They argue with confidence that the UFO was nothing more than mundane debris, a detached panel or a fragment from the Saturn V rocket reflecting sunlight. To them, the mystery has a neat technical solution, and Aldrin's words were stretched beyond their original meaning by the media. But on the other side are UFO researchers and believers who see Aldrin's account as a rare crack in NASA's carefully guarded facade. They point out that Aldrin, a man trained to recognize spacecraft hardware, would not confuse ordinary debris with something extraordinary. To them, his careful phrasing, his refusal to fully dismiss what he saw, sounds less like doubt and more like a deliberate warning. The clash of interpretations has only fueled the legend. Was Aldrin's glowing object simply a scrap of metal adrift in space, or was it a silent witness to humanity's first steps beyond Earth? Experts continue to insist on logic, yet the whispers of a cover-up keep the story alive. In the vacuum of space, where proof is elusive, the line between science and speculation blurs, and that is where Aldrin's story thrives. More than half a century after Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin's words still echo like a riddle from the stars. He never declared that he saw aliens, never offered proof of another civilization, yet he refused to erase the memory of that strange light drifting outside Apollo 11, a sight that official reports could never quite silence. And that silence, that gap between what was said and what was felt, has become the most haunting part of his legacy. NASA gave the world triumph, a flag on the moon, a victory in the Cold War. Aldrin gave the world something else, a lingering question. What if humanity was not alone during its greatest moment? What if, in the vast silence of space, someone or something was already watching? The truth may never be fully known, but perhaps that is the point. The story of Buzz Aldrin's secret sighting reminds us that exploration is not only about answers, it is also about mysteries that pull us forward. And so the question remains, hanging like a bright object in the darkness. Do you trust NASA's explanations, or do you trust the man who stood on the moon and dared to whisper what he saw?